Welcome everybody to the Town of Williston Development Review Board. For the meeting, tonight's date is January 14th, 2025. My name is Pete Kelly. I'm the chair of the DRB. Please silence your phones and devices. Zoom attendees, please stay muted unless it's your turn to speak. For Zoom technical questions, contact planning staff through Zoom. I'll begin by taking a roll call of DRB members in attendance this evening. Nate Andrews had a last-minute commitment and he's not attending. Paul Christensen.
Present.
Lisa Braden-Harder.
Present.
Scott Riley.
Here.
Dave Turner.
Here.
The chair is present. We do have 5 in attendance, so we do have a quorum. The following items are on tonight's public hearing agenda. There's just one. It's DP 24-06, Rivers Edge Development. And this is also known as the Glacier Specific Plan Project. The Development Review Board follows rules of procedure and conducts quasi-judicial proceedings, aka public hearings like court, pursuant to Williston Unified Development Bylaw, WDB, Chapter 6, Appendix A. The powers of the DRB are established in and limited by this bylaw, as well as state statute, and expounded upon in the staff reports for each public hearing application. As volunteer public officials, we are held to the standards of the Williston Volunteer Policy and the Williston Conflict of Interest Ordinance. Question for the DRB members. First question, does any member wish to be excused on account of a conflict of interest? Hearing none. Second question, does any member wish to report an ex parte contact? Okay. First order of business is a public forum. This is when we open up the floor to members here in the audience, as well as people participating remotely to address the board on issues not on tonight's agenda. So this is for anything that anybody would want to discuss with the DRB that's outside of River's Edge. Is there anyone that would like to bring something forth to the DRB? Any virtual hands raised?
Seeing no chats and no raised hands on Zoom.
Okay, so now let's go into agenda item number 2. It's the public hearing, DP 24-06. Would the applicant please come forth? If you would state your name and address for the record, please.
Brian Courier, Larry Burke Civil Associates, representing River's Edge, 13 Corporate Drive, Essex, Vermont.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, before I hand it over to staff to give a summary of their staff report, just like to set the stage for what I envision the sequence of events for tonight. So the staff has made a recommendation to continue this hearing and fill in the blanks on several items that have been raised by the staff report. And is the hearing going to be continued? That's TBD, but I would say that's likely. And but we welcome testimony by the public. We want to hear feedback. We want this to be an open forum. We want people to engage and participate. If you have access to the staff report provided what has been labeled a continuance punch list. So I think that this very much applies to you, Brian, because the plan after the staff has gone over their staff report The intent is to go through line by line on the punch list items, and with the goal to have the DRB members have an open exchange with you, representing the applicant, on the items that have been brought forth in the continuance punch list. And as we walk through, we will either identify the item as closed or as open. And if it's open, then, and we continue the hearing, then it would either, the open items would be addressed at the next hearing or at final plans. And so the objective is to come to that determination tonight.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Understood?
Okay. Any questions from the public on tonight's format before I turn it over to staff for their report? Okay, hearing none. Is this you, Matt?
I'm going to give a brief introduction and
Okay.
then turn the bulk of it over to Emily Heyman, Senior Planner, who will take you through the staff report and
Right.
the review of the project.
Right.
So the item before the Development Review Board tonight is first and foremost a discretionary permit application. For those of you watching at home or here in the room who aren't deeply familiar with the Williston Development Review's policies and procedures, discretionary permit review is, for lack of a more technical term, the big review. This project has been through a pre-application process with the Development Review Board to talk about concepts for development of the property, and is now before the board with a very complete and extensive plan set covering all kinds of details that need to be addressed in order for development to be approved under the town zoning and to proceed. So discretionary permit review is the most detailed and sort of extensive review of a project that happens at the DRB, point by point through all of the requirements of Williston's bylaws, as well as some public works standard specifications and other ordinance compliance that our bylaw calls out. This project is unique in that it is one of a very few that, prior to its review by the DRB, has gained what is called specific plan approval from the Planning Commission and the Select Board. A specific plan means that there are certain elements of this development that the applicant committed to in that process with the Planning Commission and ultimately Select Board in exchange for some amendments to the bylaws that only apply to this project and only if it meets its commitments under the specific plan. The staff report that Emily put together and that she'll be presenting to you tonight reviews the project under all of those things: the normal Williston development bylaw, the modifications or additions to it that were approved as part of specific plan, and the commitments the applicant made about the development as it relates to gaining that specific plan approval. So there's a little more to it. The staff report is a little longer. One of the things that the specific plan process did was consolidate the growth management review and scoring and analysis with the discretionary permit review, something that's normally 2 steps in our process. So you're going to hear about how this project is not going through the growth management process, but must be analyzed under its criteria and must meet a certain score in order to proceed. Emily will take you through that, as well as all of the just normal things we talk about with subdivisions, including things like wildlife habitat impact, viewshed impact, streets meeting specifications, development density, and all of those other things. So it's a little different than a normal discretionary permit review. You'll see citations in Emily's report to the places where the bylaw was changed. You'll see that those changes are really few and quite small, but they're important based on the way this project went forward. So for everybody who's watching, this is now following the normal Development Review Board procedure as slightly modified by specific plan approval, which is memorialized in the document. The specific plan was a legislative act by the Select Board to change the bylaws for this particular project. So if you see something different and there's a question that comes up, that may be why. And I'm going to leave it here and watch the proceedings. Emily's got you through all of the report.
Not quite so fast. So, one thing that I would like to start before Emily starts her staff report is a discussion about what is not in front of the DRB tonight.
Mhm.
So, so we don't have extended testimony on those topics, such as impact on schools. I'll use that as an example.
Mhm.
So if you or Emily could summarize that
Sure.
for the audience, that would be appreciated.
I'll do the high level, and Emily can hit the details when she gets to them. But impacts are a good place to start. Williston, in the past, has charged a school impact fee. It went toward the funding of some expansions that were done a little over 20 years ago. Currently, there are no expansions of the schools planned due to increased student population, because there has not been an increased student population. So we're not charging a school impact fee right now, but impacts to the schools is not a review criteria in the zoning bylaw. Williston does charge impact fees in two other dimensions. One is related to impacts to the town's ability to provide recreational facilities. So there is a per dwelling unit impact fee that is paid at the time of application for each residential unit. So there's not a big discussion of what recreational facilities will be needed because this development is coming in. That's baked into the payment of the impact fee. Transportation impact fees are also paid by all residential projects on a per unit basis. Those fees can be spent on projects throughout the town that mitigate the impacts of increased traffic from increased development. Traffic's a little more nuanced. There is also a discussion of traffic that the applicant provides and that the staff analyzes to look if there's any improvements to the road system, particularly bottlenecks at intersections, that would be necessary because of the increased traffic that this specific development is generating. So sometimes those come up, sometimes they don't. Emily can go over the report tonight. You know, what kind of people are going to live in this subdivision is not something that's addressed by the Williston Development Bylaw, nor is it reviewed by the DRB as a result. There are also some things about this being a specific plan. The real crux of this project is that the applicant is proposing to give land, including some developable land at the corner of Mountain View and Old Stage Road, to the town for the express purpose of conserving an important viewshed from Mountain View Road to Camel's Hump. So impacts on the viewshed, to some degree, how they would be mitigated and which of them would be preserved, were decided as part of the specific plan approval. So there are boundaries to what the DRB reviews. As in all cases, what the DRB reviews is compliance with the project against the provisions of Williston's Unified Development Bylaw. So board's heard it, some folks in the audience have probably heard us do it before, but we always advise everyone, you know, if it's not in the bylaw, then it's not something that can be regulated as part of this process.
Great. Thank you, Matt.
I'm off the hook now?
Off the hook.
All right.
You go join your son, the future planner.
Gotta be smart.
Emily,
All right.
your turn.
Thank you, Pete. This is a request for a discretionary permit for a 107-unit residential subdivision in conformance with SP 23-01, Glazer Specific Plan. The property is currently undeveloped. An element of the specific plan approval and this subdivision is the creation of two open space parcels totaling 48.42 acres with irrevocable offers to be donated to the town. The total property acreage is 94.66 acres. The proposed use is residential with access onto town roads. The zoning district is the residential zoning district, where it is subject to Conservation Commission review, but not Historic and Design Advisory review. Tonight, the staff's recommendation is to take testimony and continue the hearing and postpone deliberations and the approval. The staff recommendation is for various reasons. There's some items that can be discussed with the applicant that will inform how they revise their plan sets, either revising their plan sets before the next hearing or at final plans. And for a project of this scale, guidance must be provided before staff can finalize the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and conditions of approval. For example, growth management, as we'll get to in a moment. Overall, while there are several outstanding items for the applicant address, they're fairly minor and do not require a significant redesign. In my staff report, I provide a timeline for a possible continuance date on February 11th. The applicant has indicated to me today that March 11th might be better. We can discuss that timeline at the end of the meeting tonight. This is the first time the Development Review Board is reviewing this discretionary permit. The prior history is summarized here. Pre-application took place in November 2023, and the specific plan was approved in January 2024. The Conservation Commission commented. Their recommendations are included. Public Works and Fire also commented. Public Works comments will be included in the conditions of approval. And we are adding the E911 coordinator. So our Listers and Assessors Office is the E911 coordinator. They make sure that street names and numbers follow local and state policies, and they have been informed of the road names. The fire department comments can't be enforced because their policy is not an ordinance. Some items will be addressed in the proposed conditions of approval. Fire apparatus turnaround during construction, and making sure that on-street parking and corner clearances are met on the proposed roads. One comment letter was received at the time of mail-out and is included in your packets. As of this moment, we have not received any other comment letters. What follows is a quick summary of the specific plan. There were 3 substantive changes made to the Unified Development Bylaw in the Residential Zoning District chapter, the Growth Management chapter, and the Street Tree chapter. Appendix K was adopted as an appendix to the bylaw with all the accompanying documents that were part of the Planning Commission and Select Board review. The Glazer-specific plan substantial benefit is the conveyance of 50 plus or minus acres of open space to the town. What follows is a summary of the pre-application recommendations. I do note that at pre-application, 3 concepts were submitted with more units than what's being reviewed tonight. So some of those pre-app recommendations are not applicable anymore. And some do need more clarification from the applicant. The focal point distance, construction management plan details, some landscape modifications, and then owner's responsibilities, so the private covenants for the association related to private improvements, watershed protection buffers. And then in terms of the Conservation Commission, there's some discussion about water protection buffer demarcation. Residential zoning district. So compliance is anticipated with the dimensional standards, setbacks from front, side, rear yard setbacks, as well as building height. For open space development, we anticipate compliance here. So prior to finalizing the findings of fact, the DRB must decide if the 48.42 acres complies with the 50 plus or minus acres that's codified in Chapter 39. Irrevocable offers of dedication for the open space parcel must be submitted prior to discretionary permit approval, as well as the floating trail easement. And that the conceptual parking lot be moved from the viewshed open space, removed from the land that will be donated to the town. The acreage that's being conveyed to the town is 1.5 acres less than that 50 plus or minus, and staff recommends that that is within an acceptable range. Chapter 39 was written to intentionally include that plus or minus symbol because it was based on a pre-application concept design prior to complete surveying and engineering. The remaining acres of the development, as well as the remaining 46.24 acres of the development area includes the Class 2 wetlands and protection buffers. So there's 2 open space parcels to the town, a large wetland that will remain in private private ownership, and then the two neighborhood clusters. What follows is that bylaw citation specific to this project. 39.9, pedestrian-friendly development. Compliance is anticipated here. There's a place where a sidewalk needs to wrap around the cul-de-sac. In terms of focal points, they must identify the distance of each home to the proposed neighborhood building. And concluding the hearing, the DRB must make findings that a minor exception to this distance standard is acceptable because Glazer Court will be adjacent to the future town-owned viewshed open space. Connectivity, also compliance anticipated due to wetlands. Connecting Glazer Court cul-de-sac to the loop road is not feasible. And there is an anticipated future connection to the west per the official map. Enforcements and guarantees, so separate to the staff report, I've provided some recommended edits to the development agreement, particularly to phasing, as well as comments from Public Works about the irrevocable offers for the roads and infrastructure and the warranty deeds, as well as the private covenants and bylaws. A condition of approval has also been recommended from the town attorney that following discretionary permit approval, the landowner and the town sign a memorandum of understanding to clarify when in the process the land is transferred to the town, as well as ensure the future town property remains free and clear of encumbrances such as Act 250 permit conditions and restrictions. This condition is unique because the Development Review Board typically does not have jurisdiction over land ownership and transfers. However, in this instance, the DRB must ensure that the substantial benefit is upheld during the DRB permitting process. Chapter 11, Affordable Homes and Growth Management. This is probably my biggest reason for recommending the continuance and not having drafted findings this evening, because the DRB must make a finding that the application upholds a growth management score of at least 50 points. So tonight, the DRB and applicant should discuss what, if any, amenities should be changed. The applicant has provided a growth management questionnaire. On the town website, we have both their questionnaire that they submitted as part of this review process, as well as the questionnaire that the advisory committee worked on with the applicant during the specific plan process. And this table summarizes what's changed between the two. No points are proposed in conserve energy. 4 points is proposed in affordable housing, and no change proposed since the specific plan review. Offer housing choices, a minor change, but I don't find that it would make an impact to the score. 2 triplexes were reduced to duplexes, and the unit count changed from 109 at pre-application to 107 tonight. Provide neighborhood space. I do recommend a reduction of 2 points, and I note my typo here where it says -1 point. Because the multi-purpose court in the middle of the recreation path is proposed to be eliminated. This came to be through the Conservation Commission process in discussing the habitat disturbance assessment with the consultant for that disturbance assessment, because there's a bird wildlife corridor through this area, and reducing the amount of human interaction in that area, i.e. people passing through on the path has a little bit of an impact, but the recreation court would have a bigger impact on this wildlife travel corridor. It was felt that maybe eliminating this path, eliminating this multi-purpose court would have a benefit to the conservation value for the wildlife. And also -1 point because the neighborhood gardens where they're proposed without access to water doesn't seem like a functional amenity. So the DRB should discuss if another amenity could be provided elsewhere, or if the application is acceptable. What they are proposing is a community building in the Loop neighborhood for the residents to use. Paths and trails, 10 points, no change since pre-application. They're going to be constructing multi-use path along Mountain View Road and connecting the 2 Loop neighborhoods down to the path on Old Stage Road near near Wildflower Circle. Design for context, 5 if revised. So the architectural elevations and building footprints on the civil set must be revised to align with the commitment that garages are recessed from front facades, or at least 4 feet, that porches are offset at least 4 feet from the garages, that a porch or a pedestrian element is extending forward of the garages. This came out of the discussions with the Planning Commission and the Advisory Committee during the specific plan process. It is what the public comment letter is concerned about that was submitted in your packages. I do note that after the initial discretionary permit submission, they did send a couple revised elevations to me, and I forgot to include them in your packets. But I just want to make sure that in the revised civil sets that the building footprints and all of the hand-drawn and digital architectural elevations are singing the same tune in terms of where the porches will be located. For the remaining 3 categories, build close to services, neighborhood design, and sustainable transportation, they're either not applicable for close to services, and then the other 2, they are not proposing any changes. I do want to note that for sustainable transportation, these amenities must be publicly accessible, and that should be made clear in the private association covenants and bylaws. What follows are some photographs showing where the neighborhood gardens are proposed, the neighborhood building and carpool parking area, and then the excerpts of the building elevations, excluding the one that does show porches forward for some of the units. Access, Chapter 13, traffic studies. Compliance is anticipated. The plans need to show fire apparatus turning radii and designate no parking areas to ensure access. Bicycle and pedestrian access compliance is also anticipated. The plans shall be revised to include the plan and profile for the proposed multi-use crosswalk on Old Stage Road. So what this photo shows is where that new multi-use path will cross, near Adams Farm Market, basically. There needs to be a crosswalk shown there. And that leads into some questions about the traffic study. So more information is requested about the traffic study methodology, and that may be requested by the DRB. The traffic study was provided and no infrastructure improvements were recommended. The 60-page report is not included in your physical packets, but is online. The Public Works Department will be recommending an RFB, a rapid flashing beacon, at the Old Stage crossing between the proposed loop road and Wildflower Circle. However, always stop control is not recommended for the Mountain View Road and Old Stage Road intersection. And planning staff has concerns about this intersection because a new multi-use path is proposed. What follows is a list of questions for the transportation engineer to consider in reevaluating the traffic study. For example, if this study was done under the assumption that there was no crosswalk there and then a crosswalk is proposed, how is that going to play into the factors that determine if an all-way traffic stop should be put in? For example, criterion B, all-way stop control may be installed at an intersection where a study indicates that it is needed due to other factors not addressed in the other control warrants. Such factors may include where pedestrian or bicycle movements support the installation. The study observed 25 bicycle and pedestrian crossings across Mountain View Road. I wasn't quite sure where that was taking place, and currently there's not a pedestrian crossing on Mountain View Road, so 25 is quite significant. There's also some grade difference between Mountain View Road, the existing path where it loops around Adams Farm Market, and where this crosswalk might be. So I want some more information about how the Mountain View Road and Old Stage Road elevations and grades play into the sight lines and distances if you have vehicles turning off Mountain View Road where someone may be crossing Old Stage Road. Off-street parking and loading, this one's easy. The houses have parking either on driveways or garages. Bicycle parking and end-of-trip facilities are not required for residential uses and are separate from the sustainable transportation requirements discussed earlier. On-site infrastructure, compliance is also anticipated. The sidewalk must wrap around the cul-de-sac to serve all of the homes. Final plans must identify underground utilities within the utility easements. So they do, for example, show the easements for Green Mountain Power. Just want to make sure it's clear that all the utilities will be underground. And I do want to note that our bylaw does not have jurisdiction over existing Green Mountain Power easements or rights-of-way along Mountain View Road. However, they could provide some information where power will drop down from an overhead line to the underground system. Municipal sewage and water. This is where the Public Works comment memo comes into play, as well as their independent review memo. And part of the reason for the continuance, some items might need to be addressed in the civil plan set, some may be fairly minor, whereas some, depending on where some of the engineering goes for water and sewer, some streets or units might need to be shifted slightly. Again, that's part of the reason for the continuance, to determine, are these minor things, or should they be part of the plan set that the DRB approves? And the Public Works Department did provide their memos. Maintenance, so the neighborhood parks and open space. This includes the Class 2 wetlands and the growth management neighborhood amenities that the Owners Association will have responsibility to upkeep them, and that sustainable transportation amenities will be publicly accessible. Snow storage and removal, we also anticipate compliance, but just want to make sure that the snow storage will not have an impact on water quality. And lastly, solid waste. It's expected that each home will be served individually, but if a consolidated, and not a consolidated dumpster enclosure area. Chapter 17, accessory and temporary uses and structures. This is for the construction temporary use. The plans need to address pre-application recommendation 2D. They don't show any fencing or gated security access. And the DRB does have the option to require those features to prevent entry onto construction sites. The plans must also provide more detail about where materials and equipment will be stored, contractor employee parking, and ensure that safe access is maintained, including turning radius for emergency service vehicles during all construction phases. Density complies as proposed. The maximum density allowed would be 225 units. They are proposing 107. Landscaping, I broke this down into a couple specific areas. For area 1, this is between units 1 through 8 and the north side of the Moss property. The DRB must decide if the location is acceptable as proposed, or if the buffer should be moved between the units and the stormwater pond. Basically, the DRB asked that the landscape buffer be planted adjacent to the proposed homes rather than along the exterior property boundary. Doing so would place the landscape buffer between the homes and the stormwater system. Area 2, units 9 through 24, and the future town forest pasture parcel. A different species with better tolerance for poor drainage should be selected, because these trees are proposed within the watershed protection buffer. Area 3, recreation path. The plans shall include a type 3 buffer. That buffer spacing requirements can be distributed along both sides of the path, as well as mowing limited to the path edges. That comes out of a Conservation Commission recommendation. Area 4, Glazer Court, Pat, and the Batdorf property. This also partly comes out of a Conservation Commission recommendation. The type 2 dense plantings buffer should be replaced, and street trees along Glazer Court should be enhanced to provide a type 3 buffer. The proposed plantings are 38 white cedars, but it's missing the required type 3 or 4 buffer on that exterior side to qualify for that type 2 designation. And the plantings should be interspersed between the street trees on the western side of Glazer Court to improve the travel corridor. Lastly, Area 5, units 90 through 107 and the future town viewshed parcel. There will be a condition requiring a type 4 buffer between the homes and the property line. While this would not be required by the bylaw, the plantings would be proposed where adjacent to the future building envelope and town open space. Street trees, compliance anticipated. Per the Glazer specific plan, they're not required to do trees along Mountain View Road or Old Stage Road. The two proposed private roads do have street trees. And in combination with the landscaping plan, it needs to be ensured that no more than 15% are from the same genus. I do note that, for example, the honey locust is 30%. Conservation areas, so the Conservation Commission reviewed this application on December 18th. This Conservation Commission staff report and Arrowwood Environmental Habitat Disturbance Assessment are also available. There is significant wildlife habitat area on the property. Arrowwood also has a report about this corridor. It had some recommendations that can't be addressed in this application because of the specific plan process. The majority of the development layout has been designed, so that's where the Conservation Commission recommendations decided to compromise with the multi-use court, enhancing the travel corridor along the western side. Farmlands of local importance, this complies as proposed, as well as scenic viewshed. These were two significant components of the specific plan discussion. And I do want to note that Windswept Farm relies on the Glazer property for pasture and hayfield. So independently from this subdivision review and development review, the town manager and the select board should discuss private separate lease agreements after the discretionary permit approval process and prior to the open space conveyance to the town for any usage of what would become in the future town-owned land. The DRB itself does not have jurisdiction over land conveyance and land use leases. And that scenic view shed, also a major discussion as part of the specific plan proposal where 14.98 acres of land along Mountain View Road has been recognized as important view shed and will be the town-owned open space parcel. Watershed health, also from the Conservation Commission recommendations. They have provided an erosion and runoff control plan, as well as wetlands protection. And there are some recommendations from the Conservation Commission about the buffers. Where the watershed buffer comes closer to homes, they're requesting more boulders to delineate that buffer. And there is a place where a utility crossing for a sewer force main will go through the Class 2 wetland and buffer. However, it's the minimum impact feasible. It's going through the narrowest portion of the watershed and wetland buffer. Outdoor lighting compliance is also anticipated. They provide lighting for the triplex buildings. We do need to see a lighting plan for the neighborhood building and if the parking lot is going to have lighting as well. And lastly, transportation and recreation and park impact fees are assessed on a per unit basis with administrative permit. That school impact fee was retired. What follows is the continuance punch list. So there's 5 questions that are unfortunately misnumbered here, but there are 5 questions for the DRB to discuss with staff and the applicant. And then what follows is a summary of all of the punch list items from the staff report that will either be addressed prior to the continued hearing or at final plans. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Emily. Dive into the continuance punch list. I'd like to give you an opportunity to address the board in a general nature, if you care to.
Yeah, I mean, we've worked with staff and various committees for quite a long time on this proposal, and it's kind of coming to a spearhead here. So, you know, we're excited to hopefully respond to all these detailed questions and comments and get a application in front of you folks that is approvable.
Okay. Sounds like there was a conversation with staff earlier, a recent conversation, I don't know if it was today or not, about a different date for a continuance, a date certain, and the staff report had proposed Tuesday, February 11th, and made mention of a conversation with you about Tuesday, March 11th. Is that, would that be your preferred continuance date?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, with that, let's dive into, let's all renumber these now so that we can keep track of it, 1 through 5. Item number 1, if the proposed 48.42 acres complies with the 50 plus or minus acres per WDB 39.8.2.13. I'm gonna kickstart and say I believe it does. DRB members, does anybody have opposition to that position? Okay, we can move on from that. Item number 2, if a minor exception to the focal point distance standard will be permitted because Glacier Court is adjacent to the future town-owned view shed open space per WDB 29.9.2.2. So it's basically asking, can a minor exception be granted? DRB members, my position is that given the circumstances, that's a reasonable request, and I recommend that a minor exception be granted. Is there any opposition to that? Okay, we're in agreement on that one. Item number 3, if the project and growth management questionnaire as proposed achieves a 50-point score, or if revisions are necessary per WDB 11. Okay, so this one's gonna take a little more discussion. All right, DRB members, I'm on page 6 of 17. The first item that I would suggest we discuss is provide neighborhood space. The criteria has a range of 0 to 10 points. On the original application, the applicant was granted 7 points. Due to changes, it's now at 5. Brian, what options are there from your perspective to increase from 5, the current proposed 5 points from staff?
I think on the next page, Pete, the staff has indicated that bringing water services to our community garden areas would be an improvement, as those are more at the forefront now with the elimination of the multi-use path that was requested by the Williston Conservation Commission in response to a habitat disturbance assessment that was done. So that was not our removal, it's our response to their request. And as staff notes, one neighborhood garden area is 10 feet from a water main. That one's pretty simple, but the other one's substantially bigger and is the main community element on the northern part of the parcel. So I don't think bringing water service, one of those yard hydrants, copper service line to those areas is a significant challenge.
Oh, so you're saying you'll serve both neighborhood gardens with water? Is that what you're saying?
Those 2 areas, yes.
Those 2 areas?
Yep.
Okay. So staff, with that commitment, what would be the proposed?
Are you asking the staff, or you want to ask the board?
I'm asking staff first, what change they would make in the scoring.
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Absolutely.
So just to be clear, the path between the two neighborhoods is being eliminated because of, it crosses through the wildlife protection area?
So it's not the path, it's the multi-use recreation court that was centered on the path.
Okay. So is the path still in existence?
The path is still on the plan, yes.
And is the multi-purpose recreation court still in existence?
No, that's it's on your plans in front of you, but when we come back, it will be removed.
So to ask a pointed question, you have two little gardens. Not a hell of a lot of amenities for a development this size.
Yeah,
In
so,
fact, it's almost nothing.
yeah, so those are the two areas that the staff indicated could be improved through water service.
Well, staff might have indicated that, but this board member thinks you're underserving it dramatically.
And so the larger piece of it is a 1,200 square foot community building and associated parking lot on the lower loop. That has been on the
And
specific.
what will that be used for?
It's a community center, so birthdays, just a general open gathering space for the community.
But no outdoor fields, no recreation area, no playgrounds, no place for kids to go run around, no.
Yeah, I
on
mean,
and
there's
on.
15 acres being dedicated to the town along Mountain View Road. I
that's-
think
that's-
that's a
Yeah,
pretty
that's-
substantial
that's-
recreation area.
That's part of it, but
Yep,
that's not the development.
yep. So the only piece of it that's changing, which again is in response to Williston Conservation Commission recommendation, is the removal of the multi-use path, or the multi-use recreation court centered on the path. And we are planning to add water services to those two garden areas, making them more usable. And we're still maintaining the structural component being the 1,200 square foot building and associated parking lot.
Can you move the courts to someplace different besides in the center of the path?
We talked about that with the commission. If you look at the plan up on the screen, there's kind of a pinch point as you approach either side. It's positioned in the middle, and this was quite a conversation with the specific plan committee, but it's positioned in the middle purposefully because that's where the buildable area gets wider, which is represented in the white area. So if you move it one way or the other, in our Conservation Commission meeting, it didn't seem to meet the intent of the HDA and the recommendations from Arrowwood as far as keeping that corridor open. And we'll get into it a little bit further down the line, but they're also requesting we do, fairly substantial plantings along that recreational path, where before we weren't proposing any landscaping along the path.
And what uses were in that recreational area that's being eliminated? Was that pickleball or?
We're showing a pickleball court, so usually those are multi-purpose with tennis and pickleball, that sort of use.
Yeah.
So the discussion was about the noise. Pickleball apparently is pretty noisy, and just general activity associated with that court may deter wildlife corridor crossings where the rec path, which is generally at grade, folks are just walking through leisurely, wouldn't generate as much commotion as the courts that are there.
We try never to design your project. However, if you got rid of unit 28, there's an awful lot of land sitting right there that you could move, amenities into and behind. So, just a thought.
Yeah,
Nobody wants to reduce units, and that's up to you guys.
Obviously, that's why we're here. The growth management score has been proposed by staff. The DRB needs to confirm it. The only change in this category, which I'll say at the DRB process, you folks confirmed a score of 52. So we needed a score of 50. And we're adding to one of our
Well,
elements,
this is
obviously
discretionary
stricken away.
permit, this is not pre-app, so.
Understood, but essentially, we have a 2-point buffer as well, and this is one of the many categories, so.
I'm not sure I agree with you on that statement.
That there's many growth
That there's
management
a
categories.
buffer. The board still needs to agree and confirm it.
Understood, I'm merely stating we scored 52, and the requirement is 50. So unlike normal growth management process
But
where it's
Brian,
competitive.
But it still
we're-
needs to be confirmed by the board.
Understood, understood.
Okay. So we're going to, as a board, we're gonna table that one, and we're gonna talk about it in deliberative session.
We did get a comment from someone on Zoom about the microphones are hard to hear. I'm not sure if this is the distance from DRB members or if it's a setting in the computer system.
Yeah, they are pretty far away.
We could snag a public one until it's time for public comment.
Oh, it's right upstairs.
Do you want me to move the public comment one back over?
So I think the solution here is it must be Scott, because the rest of us are right on mics. So when you
when I
have, when
speak,
you
I'll
have,
move it over.
yeah, just move it over, and
Yeah, got it.
I think that would solve that.
Yep, I can do that.
Okay?
Sounds
Great,
good.
okay. Okay, so item number 3, we're gonna put in the parking lot, and the DRB is gonna have further discussions in deliberative session later this evening. Item number 4, if fencing or other security measures should be provided on the construction phasing plans per WDB 17.1.5. What is your position on that, Brian?
We're,
Page 11.
okay, so we're moving past the rest of the growth management, just to be, goes on to the next page.
Fair point. I did get derailed on that, okay. I don't believe that they're,
Design for context.
design for context is a big one, we gotta talk about that, so, thank you, Brian, for bringing me back there. Design for context, a big part of this is the, requirement to have, in a commitment that was made during the specific plan about garages recessed from front facades. And it doesn't appear like the elevations that were provided comply with that.
Yes, so the initial ones that were submitted showed some of the garages in front of the porches or at the same plane. We did submit revised elevations for the multis that show the porches that are extended 4 feet past the garages. That's our intent. There is some typical single-family footprint shown on the lot that don't have that configuration. All the multis do. It's our intent to provide that, so we'll be sure that there's correct elevations in any typical footprints show that orientation, so we don't have any confusion.
Did you give those already to Emily?
There was the original ones, and then they did submit a set of hand-drawns that show the side views of the duplexes and triplexes.
Nothing you want to share with the board?
I'm pulling them, they're loading right now.
Ah.
Yep. And then making sure that the footprints on the civil set match up with these hand drawings.
So our intention is to have porches extend 4 feet past the front of the garage, meeting the standard.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, should we continue to March 11th, is it fair to say that you could provide those updated drawings at that next hearing?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. DRP members, any questions on this topic?
I guess the only comment would be that the porches are designed for people to sit on them, right? And it's the idea of having a neighborhood.
Yeah.
So when you're walking by, you can talk to your neighbor, so they'll be sized appropriately enough for a couple people to sit out there and a couple of chairs and have a table and talk to their neighbors while they're walking by.
Yeah, we can provide,
Okay.
plan view of the units as well.
Anything else? No? Okay. No, you're good?
I'm good.
Okay. Okay. So back to item number 4. When I posed the question, Brian, about fencing and other security
Yeah.
measures in the construction phasing plan, your position on that topic?
The security gate, we have no issue with. I understand why that's been implemented. The construction hours are what they are. Sometimes putting a gate in front ensures that to happen. We don't expect that to happen here, but we're more than happy to put a security gate at the entrance on our construction maintenance plan. We're more than happy to, and we do show some elements on our erosion control plans, but show where stockpiling is, where contractor parking is, material storage is. Likely it'll be in the back of the lot, far away from Old Stage and Mountain View. The only thing I would take exception to is a fence around the entire limit of disturbance. So in most of these type of subdivisions, we stake out limit of disturbance, construction fencing is erected. That's your typical ski tape, not a chain link fence like you may see at Finney Crossing. We'd like to demarcate the limit of disturbance in that manner.
Emily, is fencing, it's a new standard, I believe, is fencing required all the way around it or not?
It's vague, so what the bylaw says is construction equipment and materials must not be stored so that they constitute an attractive nuisance. The administrator or DRB may require that security fencing or other measures be used to prevent entry onto construction sites or access to stored equipment and materials. So I think the DRB's past precedent in areas where development is happening much closer to an existing road or sidewalk, more densely developed areas, the whole site is fenced. In a place like this, it might just be fencing areas where materials or equipment are stockpiled rather than the entire site.
That certainly makes a lot more sense.
Especially when you consider that there's only gonna be 18 units with the phasing, and,
No, it makes a lot more sense if you fenced around the construction materials.
yeah, I agree. Okay, and is that shown, Emily, at final plans, the construction phasing plan?
That is where the second half of the punch list is kind of up to the DRB and applicant as to what can be
Timing.
reasonably done by the next plans, what could be turfed to final plans.
Okay.
I think staff's preference is either is fine, because it's a minor element.
And question number 5, if the traffic study should be reevaluated. I think the answer to that is yes, it should be reevaluated, given the changes. Does any DRB member have a counter position on that? Okay.
If, just to give a little context, I think some of the confusion here is our fault. We did grade that path and its approach to the intersection. Unfortunately, because it's so far away, we didn't provide a site plan that explicitly shows the grading over there. So we do anticipate a 5% approach to the crosswalk, like you would expect, which would raise it pretty substantially from the existing grade, which I think staff's concern is that there's a fairly substantial grade there's a ditch line at the corner there to the elevation of Mountain View Road is something like 6-7 feet. So in order to maintain ADA standard of 5%, we do anticipate lifting that area pretty substantially, putting a culvert in order to facilitate that crossing. So those details weren't in our site plans. They were designed, but their specific site plan wasn't included because it's so far away from everything else. So
And it includes the crosswalk across Old Stage?
That's right. Yeah, the one at the intersection.
Right at the intersection?
Yep.
And,
So-
and it includes the, where it abuts on the other side, on the east side?
Yes.
Do you finish that side too?
In that, well, that is on grade now.
Okay.
That's
East
pretty
side,
close
west
to
side.
existing.
Okay.
Yeah. So that side's fairly simple. And then I did talk to our traffic consultant ahead of this meeting. He did mention that the warrant analysis that was done, it wasn't borderline, it wasn't very close. There's multiple warrants that go into this type of intersection, and the volume warrant was only 3 of the required 8 hours that would be necessary for an all-stop warrant. So in his opinion, it isn't close to meeting the warrant, but more than happy to get his written response to staff's comments.
Okay. That's what we would like.
Okay.
I'd have like a quick comment. Emily, on this 13.8, I'd like to see RFB written out as a rapid flashing beacon. I didn't know that jargon.
Yes, thank you.
Neither did I.
Staff report is usually acronym soup.
And I'm getting better of them, but that was a new one. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so now we're into the next category. And the heading reads, the DRB and applicant should discuss what items can be resubmitted by January 27th for a hearing on February 11th, and what items can be deferred to final plans.
And those dates have changed.
And those dates will change. So those dates would be, the February 11 would change to March 11. And Emily, what does, or Hannah, what does January 27 change to? February what?
I believe it's February 24th.
Yeah, that's what I have.
24?
Yep.
Okay. Irrevocable offers of dedication for open space. Any reason why to delay that?
The only reason I would say is that in talking with staff today, there's a few different parties involved. There's the current landowner, Jack Glazer, the developer, River's Edge, and then the town attorney, and what exactly the mechanism is for deeding the parcels to the town, whether an irrevocable offer is necessary or not. Typically, that's for roads or something the town may wait to act on at some point in time through a warranty period or something. When I think simply it may be able to just be deeded to the town as an approval condition. So those parties are gonna get together and discuss, and hopefully we'll have something by February 24th, but if not, hopefully it can just be an approval condition.
That doesn't need to be done by DP.
Okay, staff, are you okay with final plans on that one?
Yes, and I think before the next hearing, I'll have some more clarity from our town attorney where if it's an irrevocable offer, it might change.
Okay. All right, so I'm gonna note that as final plans at this point. Floating trail easement, same thing, final plans.
Yep.
Emily, speak up if staff has any concerns over these.
I think maybe a floating trail easement draft at discretionary permit, that'll just make it go faster at final plans if there's something in advance, especially because we're already talking to the town attorney.
That's a fairly easy one too.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's the trail easement along the path that floats wherever the town wants
Right.
to connect to the
Right.
town trail. So it's just a little stub of it.
Right, okay, so I'm gonna put that at DP then, which is my designation for the next hearing. Number 3, remove the conceptual parking lot from the view shed open space parcel. That needs to be on the civil plans at the next hearing.
Yep.
The applicant must identify the distance of each home to the neighborhood building. That should be at the next hearing.
Okay.
Were necessitated by DRB recommendations, changes to the growth management questionnaire to achieve the 50-point score. we're gonna talk more about that in deliberative session. That's tied to what we're gonna talk about later as a board. Number 6, final plans must include the draft deed restriction with affordability calculation.
Is that a final plan?
That's final
Final
plans,
plan, right.
yeah. So that's already identified as final plans. Sustainable transportation amenities must be publicly accessible and should be made abundantly clear in the private association covenants and bylaws. That's final plans. Is this numbering system?
Just to confuse you.
Microsoft Word was not my friend on this.
I was like, am I missing something here?
Start over.
I mean, okay. Road names, you don't have any problem changing the road names, do you?
It's just one of them.
It's just one?
Yep.
Yep,
Final
Yeah, that's
plans, right?
yep, that's final plans. The plans shall be revised. So this is radii, signage. I'd like to see that at the next DP.
Yeah, it's no problem.
Sidewalk, next DP. I'm on the second number 5. Construction phasing plan, that's final plans. Because you're not gonna really know, that takes a while to pull that together in terms of understanding exactly what you're gonna do, when and where. Number 6, final plans shall address the comments of the WCC memo dated December 18.
So that says final plans. It might be better to do some of the landscaping things as part of the civil set.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree too.
So I can change that to DP.
Okay, I'm gonna strike the word final plans and have that be a DP, okay? For both A and P.
Can we chat about those?
Yes.
Some of those are,
Oh, there's
Up to your
actually goes through
discretion.
E, okay, yes.
page 12. Emily's got some good diagrams there.
We're currently on page 16.
Well, no, he's referring back to the,
Yeah.
The
The
landscape.
landscaping.
Yeah.
to the comments from the Conservation Commission,
All right.
correct?
Yes, no, I'm talking about Emily's staff report. What-
Yeah.
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 Okay. Which one would you like to talk about?
The first one, how about area 1?
Okay,
So we're showing the landscaping in between the Moss property, and there's a stormwater detention pond there. Staff is saying, do you want it along that boundary, or do you want it directly behind the units? I don't have a strong opinion either way. Obviously, it's where I think it should be in between the pond and the Moss property, but I don't have a strong opinion either way, so.
Emily, what prompted your recommendation to move that landscaping closer to the homes?
There's a pre-app recommendation, landscape buffer should be planted adjacent to the proposed homes rather than along the exterior property boundary. So our bylaw's a little bit vague on this, but typically our requirement is that buffers be planted along the exterior boundary of the parent parcel. During the pre-application discussions, I think it was felt that planting it closer to the homes made more of a buffering sense, especially where these homes are gonna be near, the windswept farm.
Yeah, I do remember that, the Windswept Farm folks wanted the horses not accessible.
Yeah, so this is down by the road. So this is right, so just to the right of, where it's area A, that's Old Stage Road.
Got it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of in this, sort of no man's land. The road is situated where it is because it's opposite Wildflower. So it kind of creates this awkward area that we use for stormwater detention. I thought buffering that area from the Moss property was more beneficial, kind of create that separation.
Along the property line.
Yeah.
I would tend to agree. And also, it would also give your, your potential purchasers more of a feeling of space behind their houses.
Yeah, yeah. And,
Right.
and those ponds aren't wet ponds where there's
Right.
cattails and those sorts
Right.
of things anymore, so
Yeah,
it's
I-
not bad to look at, so.
Yeah, I agree with your position, Scott, on that.
I agree.
Lisa? you-
Sounds good, I
You good
agree.
with that? Paul? Okay, so, no change from the current plan
Okay.
on area one.
Yep.
Area two, let's talk about that.
Yep, so that's just species. We have a honey locust proposed through there that's not great in wetter areas, so we'll be sure to upgrade that. But that's taking place in an HOA strip buffer between the pasture and the homes. I thought this was more where you folks were talking about landscaping, kind of separating the pasture land and the units, so that's what this is trying to accomplish in an HOA land strip through there, so. But specifically, this comment is about the honey
Species.
locust. So we'll be sure to swap that.
Okay,
That's
so you
easy.
got no problem with swap out there?
Yep, and then area three, the planning's along the path, as we've talked about already, that was required by, or requested by the WCC. It's, they talk about a type 3 buffer through there, so it's not buffering anymore, right? It's really meant for planting up that area so wildlife can move freely through there. So type 3 has a requirement for 50% ground cover by like dense shrubs and flower beds. So that area is 1,200 linear feet long. So I'd like the DRB to consider that it's a type 3 buffer, which does include major trees and small trees plantings. I think there's maybe 4 or 5 every 100 feet or something like that, but to not require the low shrubbery and flower beds along that 1,200 feet through there. I didn't feel that was the intent of the WCC.
Emily?
So the minimum density for a type 3 informal planting buffer is full ground cover, 2 major trees, 3 ornamental or understory trees, and any combination of shrubbery or flower beds that occupies at least 50% of the area at time of planting. This buffer can be used in many circumstances. I think what Brian's asking for would be a type for formal plantings. The minimum density per 100 feet is a full ground cover of turf and 3 major trees. This buffer is most appropriate between uses of similar intensity or along public ways.
And I'm fine with the 5 trees that type 3 talks about. It's just the shrubs and flower beds that an HOA is gonna have to maintain over 1,200 feet of path.
Right.
Quite a bit.
Right.
The purpose in the WCC was to have that area planted with an understory so animals can cross.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if low, dense stuff is necessarily accomplishing.
I mean, this is an odd area in a development. This doesn't seem to me like a good place to go and put a bunch of plantings in. Just leave it as wild as possible.
Well,
I 100% agree with that. Okay, so with that, DRB members, everybody in agreement with that? Okay, Emily, given that position by the DRB, how do you recommend wording that?
Yeah, so, the recommendation from the Conservation Commission, modify the proposed landscape buffer along the east and west side of the recreation path and along the western property boundary from a type 2 dense to a type 3 buffer. Enhance the function of the hedgerow. I think what we can say this is leading to is at the next hearing, probably striking that condition or editing it in such a way that that western boundary is discussed separately from the path. And then what we would be saying for the path is provide a type 3 buffer excluding the shrubbery and flower bed requirements. So it would be
Yeah.
2 major trees, 3 understory trees per 100 feet, And that 100 feet, I think, from the, what I remember from the Conservation Commission discussion, is that can be sparsed on either side of the path, so it's not calculated on one side and then the other side. Both sides are looked at together.
Okay. That makes sense to me. Everybody in agreement with that?
Yeah.
Brian,
Okay,
you good with that?
I am, yes.
Area 4.
So Area 4 specifically talks about where we are buffering along our exterior. We had a type 2, which is essentially a cedar hedge. And one of the recommendations the WCC had for us was, so we're trying to create this corridor in between the two clusters. This dense hedge extends into that corridor. So they wanted that dense hedge to become a type 3 buffer for exactly what we were talking about before, but as it's, actually an exterior buffer. I understand if you'd want to keep in the 50% flowers and shrub piece of it, that is the requirement, but we are going to change that buffer, or we will change that buffer to a type 3 where it's shown. So that's just on the lower end off of the stub of the road there that staff indicates. So that the hatched area is our community garden. So that stuff will have to slide down because the distance of a type 3 buffer is more than that of a 2,
Right.
which we're fine doing that. The other piece of it is staff talks about changing the landscaping along Glazer Court, which is the northern pot here along the abutters property. So since it's a roadway, public way, there's no landscaping requirements as far as buffering concerns. So they talk about wanting to change the northern limit or the northern side of this roadway to a type 3 buffer as well. I personally, I think it's more, I would prefer to, if that's a concern the board has, to maybe increase the street tree requirement. I think it's 40 on center. We'd be amenable to a 30 on center or something like that. That is more what you would expect from street trees along a public right-of-way rather than a buffering requirement on the northern side that's not required. So I would lean more toward increasing the street tree spacing rather than doing a buffer type 3 again, which includes this understory requirement of shrubs and plant, flowers that, would be in a.
Well, it would actually be decreasing the spacing.
Yes, it's 40 on center now, so a type 3 is, there's 5 trees in 100 feet, so it's 5 per 100 rather than
20 feet.
20
two
feet.
and a half.
20 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you,
What's the
But the-
elevation drop from Mountain View down?
Substantial.
Yeah,
it's pretty good.
it's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
So adding more trees in there it really isn't gonna mess around with the view line going over kind of the top of them, right?
I
If you're
don't
driving
think so.
down, if you're driving down.
Yeah, and
Mountain View.
maybe you could
West.
say something like after station 11 and below, maybe the street tree spacing instead of 40 on center, change to 30 on center, 25 or whatever you're comfortable with. But I'd rather see the street tree component stay rather than changing to a buffer.
It'd be a nice entrance.
I agree with that.
Plus the fact is the town's gonna plow their
Everybody else in
salt,
agreement with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Snow into that area, it's gonna kill the trees.
Okay, Emily, you know what to do there?
Yep.
Okay.
And this is the view shed image, so where Mount Mansfield and Camel's Hump are, is to the west. So if you're looking down that street, those trees, I believe, would be kind of in the middle ground to a small hill to the south, whereas those mountains are to the east.
Yeah, you wouldn't even, you don't even see the roadway in this photo.
Yep.
Yeah, the roadway's off to the
Yeah, so-
right side.
Right.
Yep. Okay, I think that's a positive change. Okay, number 5.
So that's a type 4, basically demarcating the 15 acres being dedicated to the town along Mountain View to the backs of the homes on Glazer Court. And that's a change that we'll accept.
Okay. Okay, so does that cover, so that just covers A, correct? Of 6A? Not B, C, D, E?
Actually made them 8.
Yeah, B is proposed development must not encroach into watershed protection buffers. And you must clearly demarcate on the site plan.
Yep, and we are showing boulders at the 30-foot spacing. What the WCC asked us to do is where our units get within 10 feet of those buffers, they want boulders spaced at 10 feet rather than 30 for, encroachment purposes, so we're fine doing that.
There's nothing listed in 6 that's a problem for depicting on the plans at the next hearing?
No.
Okay. So I'm gonna categorize everything in category 6 as discretionary permit. We just talked about the A. B, I think, is pretty straightforward. The growth management score, we're gonna talk about C as later in deliberative session. Northern wetland boundary. I think that's really, everything is really administrative in nature. Would you agree?
What one are you on, Pete?
I'm on page 17,
Yeah, what number?
D, David.
6D.
8D, right?
No, 6D.
It's 6D.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you said all of those were.
I did, and then I went
We're
back
Okay,
and,
I'm sorry.
I
lost
know,
it for a
I'm
second.
sorry, that was confusing what I did.
Yeah, that's something we agreed to with the WCC.
Okay.
That's fine, yep.
Okay, and E as in Edward,
Yeah.
6E
Yep.
is, I assume, no problem as well.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, sorry about that. Now, on to number 7. Snow storage. Let's see that at DP.
Yep.
Number 8. We just went over those.
Yeah, we're choosing the, on
So-
the
So,
8A, we're choosing the acceptable.
I'm sorry, Paul?
We're choosing the acceptable on 8A.
Oh,
Let's choose one there.
right. I think we've I think we've captured,
Yeah.
we talked about all.
We did that.
all those 5 areas in sufficient detail, and staff captured our discussion and our agreement, so we can move on to number 9.
But to skip back to one item that just kind of got slipped over there. 6 Delta,
Okay?
that should be worked out between the Mosses and the homeowners association, because he should know exactly where he can cut. He's not gonna be an idiot and go into wetlands.
Right, so at the WCC, everything else is, as far as watershed buffers go, are demarcated with boulders, because
You
it'll
don't
be.
want boulders around.
Right, it'll be mowed to that edge, right, so it's
Yeah.
maintained lawn. South of the northern cluster, it's not gonna be maintained as lawn, so that's why we switched to birdhouses, cause they'll stick above the hay.
May not even need them. I mean, he'll know where to cut.
Yep, it's just that boundary is the public versus private boundary. So he won't be able to encroach into the wetlands.
I like the birdhouses. I mean, for a host of reasons.
Yep.
Okay. You good with that, Paul?
Except that. I
Okay.
just don't want any boulders around where the guys are, because a hay mine's very expensive to repair if it's a boulder.
Okay, so number 9, WDB 24, it's lighting.
Yep, so that's fine for DP.
Okay?
So the pedestrian bollard is what we've done in the past for community facilities, so we
Yep.
can do that again.
And number 10, let's capture the DP as well.
Yep.
Okay. Now it's time for the public to, public's opportunity to weigh in and to address the board. If you would like to come forth and address the board, please raise your hand. We'll call you up to this table, and if you would identify your name and address for the record. Who's up first? Come on up, sir.
Hi, is this on?
I think so.
I'm Scott Batdorf. I live to the abutting property at 1876 Mountain View Road. So just a couple things came up just now that I noticed where we have considerable views of Camel's Hump from our house. And we just want to try and be sure that there's not new trees planted between our window and Camel's Hump as they choose where to put the trees along Glacier Court.
Scott, can you just say where exactly do you live?
1876 Mountain View Road.
Which is,
It's just to the west of the,
It's this parcel right here.
It's the site D.
So this is their home on the site
oh, there you are.
plan.
Okay, great, thank you.
so as they line that Glacier Court with trees, we just want to maintain our view out our window of Camel's Hump. And again, from the rear parcel towards the back of our field, we have considerable views of Camel's Hump. And as they put trees along that bike path, it'd be beneficial to make them shorter to maintain our views, if that makes sense.
Okay, Emily,
mean
can
like
you,
apple tree
can you
size?
provide zoom out so you get a little bit more context here?
Yes.
You're gonna be a little higher than their property, right? Isn't it? Because you go up that hill, right?
It's basically on level, so as you look from our back field at Camel's Hump, it doesn't sit too high above the horizon, so I think shorter trees would be all right, or less of them. I mean, I don't think that it's necessary. I mean, they can talk with the Conservation Board about what's really best, but that'd be our interest there.
So what WDB 26122 states, scenic vistas, the question in the bylaw is where must street trees be provided? And then it says along both sides of public or private roads. Scenic vistas, it says the DRB may also, with advice of the Conservation Commission, waive the requirement for street trees to preserve a scenic vista. And then there's a subsection that's specific for Glazer's specific plan about Mountain View Road and Old Stage Road. But the core statement in the bylaw doesn't clarify whether that scenic vista has to be from just a public road or if it could be from a budding property. So there might be an opportunity there to provide a little bit of a gap from that typical 40-foot spacing where that existing home is to preserve that scenic vista.
And in the rear field here, where the bike path will pass through, we're excited about this bike path to begin with, because our kids will be off Mountain View, and all the kids from Ledgewood will have a path to school and everything like that, so we're excited about that, but the back field is slated to be, it's developable land as well, so we're in the interest of a future homeowner there to preserve their view of Camel's Hump. That's kind of why we would just like to keep those trees a little closer to the ground.
how close?
I mean, it's a field now, so it's been
How
a
closer
field.
to the ground?
I mean, could the plan just mimic what's currently there? You know?
Yeah, I
Are we
mean,
talking 10-footers, 15-footers, 20-footers, what, I mean, how?
Apple tree size.
yeah, I think so.
They don't get very high.
Yeah.
Deer would like that. We're trying to keep the animals passing
And is there
through.
if you were if you're sitting on your rear deck on your house, that was that Turner, the road coming in?
That's Glacier Court there. There is an existing tree line there now, so about half of that's on our land and probably half is is on the land to be developed, so I don't know, I guess they're planning on cutting what's there now to install these street trees.
Just leave what's there and
Yeah.
don't plant street trees.
I just figured this was the time to bring
No,
those
it's-
points to
Perfect.
here. And I don't really have much else aside from that for today.
Okay, thank you.
Basically, if you don't want a screen, that's basically normally why the screen's built, because
Yeah, exactly.
the guy wants it, but if
Yeah.
you don't want it, you should have some input.
Right. All right,
Right,
thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Other members of the public that would like to address the board? Sir?
Hi, everyone.
Oh, we have an in-person attendee, and then we can take some testimony from the Zoom participants.
Great.
Okay.
Name and address, please.
Ruben Escrapizo, 516 Wildflower Circle. So we are very close to this going to be development. Just a couple of questions, actually. First is related to just what the gentleman just said. What's the fidelity of the view shed rendering? What's the fidelity of that? What's the accuracy of that rendering? So you're looking at it, we certainly don't want it to, like, that's perfect, right? But I'm trying to just imagine the accuracy of it so that we preserve the view shed, which was the very intent of the specific plan.
Brian, can you speak to what you believe is the accuracy and fidelity of that depiction?
I would say it's pretty accurate. I mean, we supplied a CAD file to someone who does renderings, and you know, this is what he's produced. So it's based off LiDAR contouring. I don't think we had the final grade of the road established at that time, but the grade of the road is, you know, 2 feet above existing in that spot, and the homes on the uphill side are actually dug into the bank, so they're lower than existing ground typically, or at existing ground. You know, this was provided at the specific plan level, so it was provided at sketch plan, so some of the unit types have changed a little bit, but, you know, I'd say generally the vertical and the preservation of the view, I think is very accurate. I mean, especially the fact that Camel's Hump is where it is locationally, you know, the CAD file would show where those elements are horizontally, very accurately. Vertical could range a few feet, absolutely.
Yep.
So, and I appreciate that if this is in fact the case, then that's great. You know, it's just, you know, if after the fact, if it's not the case, so then we're sort of already have defeated the purpose of the specific plan. But this is great. My one last question is that the build-out plan is 5 years, from 2026 to 2030 in phases. So if you are a resident of, say, neighboring areas like Wildflower Circle, then you will have 5 years of construction. So I was just trying to understand that from my perspective as a resident of 5 years of back and forth and trucks and stuff like that. And I want to just seek clarification on how did that come about instead of just go for it, build it. But I'm not a builder, so I don't know. But 5 years as a resident with going back and forth, kids biking back and forth to school, that certainly is a concern for parents like me. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Zoom participants, so you want to champion that, Emily?
Yeah, I see Megan Cope's hand, and then after Megan, we'll take Mac.
Thank you. I really appreciate this conversation. I am also on the Plan Commission, and I live at 20 Bradish Lane in Williston. It hadn't really struck me until tonight when heard about the removal of the multi-use court, that the spaces available in this neighborhood are really going to be very limited, in terms of play space for children, especially younger children who, who are not going to be, riding their bikes over to Williston Community Park or something like that. And I would really like to encourage the DRB and the applicant to consider exceeding, ideally, that amenities floor by providing, partly the space, but also the equipment for at least a small playground. Otherwise, it just seems very stark, and not kind of kid-friendly. I love the sidewalks, but, that only goes so far. So that's my request.
Okay, thank you. Is that it?
Yep, and I think Mac is next,
Right,
and then
no,
we'll-
I meant, is that it for
Oh.
Megan, but it sounds like it is. Okay, go ahead, Mac.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yes, could you give us your address, please, for the record?
Sure. So my full name is Mark McElroy. I live at 195 Windridge. I'm in the house and plot that the Glazers used to live in, adjacent to the gift to the town. So my question is about one of the buffers shown in the plan, and I wonder, Emily, if you could pull that up again, showing it was area 2, the buffer kind of on the back side of the section near the Moss Farm. Yeah, so if you kind of look at that corner in area 2, our house is kind of a direct line bisecting the corner, kind of at the lower left of the page. So those trees there kind of are our buffer for the houses you can see there. And the question is related to the plan. So I see there's a comment about the species of trees. So I think you just wait to see what's suggested next time around. But then the other question is the density, and I'm wondering what's driving the density there. If you look at the buffer in area 1, it looks much different. I'm just curious as to how that was.
Yep, so the landscape buffer table is based on the proposed use and the adjoining land use. So that area is abutting, essentially open space. And that's how the buffer was determined.
Is it possible to do one that's slightly more dense than that?
Possibly, I would have to do some more analysis of the landscape table.
Okay. What's the best way, I guess, to follow up or see how that goes?
I think that's something that I can look through prior to the next hearing. Our landscape requirements are also a minimum, so applicants can also provide more if they choose.
Yes, I would say in regards to around the single-family homes that Mark is talking about, the landscaping buffer requirements apply to the perimeter of the property. So that's that's why that buffer's denser by the Moss abutting property. As his is substantially further away, that planting there is more of a separation between the back of those lots and the pasture where there will eventually be horses. So that is something the DRB asked us to do and is an elective that the developer decided that, it's a good idea to have some sort of separation there. We thought it was a good idea, so we implemented it. But the purpose there isn't to provide a visual screening buffer like it would be around the perimeter of the site. So we're more than happy to investigate the trees, and we can discuss it, Mark, but, yeah, I don't know if it would necessarily fall under buffer requirements, so.
Okay, yeah, we're trying to kind of picture how it will look eventually. So that's a little bit difficult, so yeah, if you have any thoughts, I'm interested to hear your feedback. And same for me.
So when I look at the civil plan, the area between those homes and the McElroy property is the proposed town open space land. So that's one of the things that I wanted to look into. And what chapter 23 says is where the use providing the buffer, open space residential, ARZD adjoining any other use. Open space developments must provide ample buffers. See chapters 31 and 39 of this bylaw. So here's a vague spot in our bylaw where the table talks about just ARZD, but then the minimum buffer width refers to chapters 31 and 39, 39 being the residential zoning district. So I think there's some great flexibility here in an open space subdivision for what type and the density of plantings that are provided, where what they're buffering between here is not the proposed homes in McElroy, but also the proposed homes and the town-owned open space pasture land.
Just for context, does the town have a plan for that strip? It's kind of a thin strip there. Is there a planned use for that at the moment?
No planned use in terms of developing anything like a structure. But if that land is used by Windswept Farm currently, then the intention would for it to remain being used by Windswept Farm.
Okay. As a connector between the two larger areas.
Right, if that little pinch point, if, my understanding is most of that land is forested, to the north of your property. But if any of that land is used currently by Windswept Farm and it's gonna be proposed to the town, then that would continue to be used by Windswept Farm.
Right. Well, in terms of my question then, is the best thing for me to just come to the next hearing, or is there any communication that you have to go through?
I think it's up to the DRB and the applicant to decide if additional plantings, there's that general requirement that open space shall provide ample buffers, if additional plantings should be planted along there. And then at the next hearing, we'll see if there's a revised landscaping plan.
Okay.
Okay,
All right,
well,
thank you.
thank you. We'll consider that in deliberative session. We'll have a conversation on the board. Okay, is there another hand raised?
Yes, there are two.
Okay,
How about Jay and then Wayne, or Wayne?
I think Jay had it first.
Oh, Jay can go, and it's Dorothea. Jay can go ahead.
Am I all set?
yep,
Hi, great. Jay Petrillo, I live on Southfield Drive, which is right off of Old State Road. And, just wondering if there can be some information brought up about the build-out period between 2025 and 2030, sort of springboarding off what, previous residents said from, Wildflower Circle. And looking at the history of build-out periods, particularly three, projects, Maple Tree Place, Coyote Lane, and Closed Circle. The reason why I bring up Maple Tree Place is because there was a horse farm there many years ago, right across the street when Maple Tree Place went in. And I didn't realize at the time, but there was a breeding horse farm as well. And I believe anecdotally, I don't have evidence or credible evidence supporting this, but from what I heard through the grapevine, that several foals died at the time because of the amount of noise, the amount of dust. My family was in construction business for years, and please excuse me if I get the terms wrong, but there's a limit, usually for major projects, there's a limit of daily dump truck runs. And I believe the term is called work zone access and egress, is that right? And is there gonna be a limit to how many trucks can go in and out? If you consider the amount of noise, the amount of dust picked up, and the horsepower. And the other two issues I want to bring up are the developments that went in Southridge. And the reason why I'm gonna bring that up, because heavy equipment went through residential areas. I'm just wondering if there was a limit of how many truck runs there was on a daily basis. And if there were concerns brought up at the time from residents of heavy equipment going in and out. So that's what I have at this point.
Okay, thank you. Emily, there's a town noise ordinance, correct?
Yep.
And the developer will need to adhere to the noise ordinance. And then in terms of truck traffic and frequency, that's an Act 250. That's an Act 250 deal, right?
Correct, yep. So our bylaw only thinks about the finished state in terms of noise that's generated by a development or vehicle trips that are generated by a development. In terms of construction trips, our bylaw does not have a standard. In terms of construction noise, our bylaw does not have a standard. Construction timing, and I believe decibel level is handled by that noise ordinance that you referred to. Southridge is an interesting case, and it's a different case because Northridge was only accessible by weaving through Southridge. So I think that's why Act 250 took more care, and Act 250 established a condition with a construction route in which way vehicles enter and exit Southridge. This development is a little bit different because Mountain View Road is a town arterial road. And Old Stage Road is a collector road where there's not really any options for, or not as many options for directing traffic through a low vehicle speed, low volume neighborhood. But I would defer to Brian if they anticipate Act 250 setting any conditions for construction trips or noise.
I wouldn't say that they, in this case, would be setting any limitations for truck trips or a specific truck route. As Old Stage and Mountain View are collector roads, this is a very accessible site.
But suffice it to say that you will comply with whatever Act 250
If I'm wrong?
designates as the approval.
Certainly. Yep.
In the springtime, the Public Works Department posts town roads from certain vehicles over a certain weight. And our experience from fielding calls and complaints from abutters during construction is that typically the noisiest time is when infrastructure is going in. That's when the biggest, heaviest vehicle loads and construction noises take place. When things move towards the construction of homes and the finishing of homes, then the number of vehicle trips and the amount of noise goes down significantly.
Act 250 will also set hours of operation. So that's with any Act 250 permit, if you're close to more densely residential areas, they'll change weekend hours. They might, narrow the scope. Inevitably, it takes longer, so you always have that conversation of what's better. But they do establish construction hours. So.
Yep. Okay, next raised hand.
Yes, hi, this is Dorothea, can you hear me?
Yes.
Dorothea, Wilkinson. I have a few questions. One, I remember you mentioning something about, the school, that these residences, new development will not impact the school, the student numbers. And so therefore, the developer does not have to contribute to the, school, cost of that.
Okay, I'm gonna have Matt come back up to the mic and talk about this topic again.
Sure. I just want to, I'll provide a little bit of clarification about school impact fees. Impact fees in Vermont may only be charged where you want new development to pay its fair share of the cost of an expansion of a facility or service that the new development in part causes you to need. So over Williston's history, there have been times where predicted new development meant that a school needed to be built or a school addition needed to be built. And the way that works is the town or school district would take out a loan, build that addition or new facility in anticipation of the new development, and then via an impact fee study, determine on a per dwelling unit basis how much was a fair share for each unit of that new development to pay. So Williston paid for a portion of the construction of the Allenbrook School with impact fees. And when the loan that the municipality took out to build the Allenbrook School was paid off, it stopped charging those impact fees because it could no longer charge them. The facility had been constructed and had been paid for, and unless a new expansion is proposed and money is borrowed for it, an impact fee could not be assessed. Similarly, same exact process with an addition of capacity at CVU High School. That bond was just paid off in November. So again, the expansion was bonded for, built, and paid for, and there is no planned future expansion of either school currently that a loan could be taken out for or that a new impact fee could be charged for. So it's not about whether this project will or will not generate new children in the school district. It probably will generate a few new kids in the school district. It's about whether, in combination with other predicted growth, those new school children would occasion the need to build a new facility for which this development should pay its fair share. And what's happening in Vermont and nationwide, but especially in Vermont, is this, you may hear the term the aging demographic or the aging population of Vermont. Williston's no different. The median person in Williston gets older every year. There are fewer children in Williston every year, and households are smaller every year. So right now, there is no expanded facility to handle a greater volume of students planned for in either of the school systems that Williston is a part of. So there's no school impact fee.
Thank you for explaining that. I've lived in Williston for 25 years or more, and my eldest child was in the class that was the largest size class. During that time, they did have to attach a trailer to Allenbrook School. It was there for quite a number of years. And when the numbers of students came down, the town, this is what I recall, sold that trailer for $1 at the time. And then guess what? All the numbers came back up with all the children in the schools. And I understand, if I'm not correct, there is a trailer attached to Allenbrook School again. So there's a trailer attached to the school. And also, when that school was built, it was built at there was a mirror image. It was only half the intended school was built. It was built, and the kids started school, and they realized, oh, we don't have a playground for an elementary school. So then they scrambled to put the playground where it is, and it's been there ever since. And they never built, I remember John Turco giving all these lectures about, this is the expansion of Allenbrook. It's gonna be, basically, it was a mirror image. It was supposed to be twice as big. And, you know, that was the plan back then. So when they, with these impact fees, they only built half the school. And then we've had a trailer attached, sold for $1, and now we have a trailer attached again. So, and Williston is only growing, and I know you do all these surveys and studies and know the numbers and the ages of everybody in the town, but this was predictable. I mean, it was predictable that you're gonna have more growth, and then to get rid of a trailer, I mean, Shelburne School, community school has a trailer attached. I mean, why they get rid of the trailer? But
Ma'am?
so if you have a trailer
Ma'am?
attached to the school,
Ma'am?
that tells you that there's a growth.
Excuse me.
problem, in my opinion.
Excuse me, so, I was giving you the courtesy to share your thoughts. This topic is not something that the DRB has any influence on. And so I would like to segue into, do you have a second question?
Yes, I do, but yeah, so it seems like you could use some money, down here from the developers, but, so my other question is the relationship between the horse farm and the town. Is there a legal contract, binding contract? I'm confused about the relationship, because this whole plan is put together to, so the horse farm can stay.
Okay,
And
so,
if you
so
have a
Emily,
view, when you drive down Mountain View Road, you can still see Camel Pump. So I'm just confused about the relationship with the town. It was the glaciers that had the relationship with the horse farm. Now, is it the town?
Yes, that's a great question. So the substantial benefit is open space, and the goals that are codified in the town plan and bylaw for this open space is view shed, working landscapes, and conservation areas. The conservation areas being the forested block and some of the wildlife corridor. When the land is transferred to the town, then the town will have to ideally concurrently or very soon after initiate some sort of agreement with Windswept Farm. This is a little bit beyond my jurisdiction and the Development Review Board's jurisdiction, because ultimately it is the select board that would be, handling the land acquisition, and they would be coordinated by the town manager's office. I have been in coordination with the town manager's office and the town attorney, and I believe they will be the ones reaching out to Windswept Farm to, start talking about what agreements need or need not be in place prior to land conveyance or at the same time as land conveyance, but.
But I want to
Yeah.
make a point, and I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second, and for a point to Dorothea's question, and that is, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but there is no legal requirement for the town to work with Windswept Farm. The town will do this probably because it makes sense, probably because the land is there, then the town wants to see Windswept continue, but the public benefit is the open land, not the open land letting Windswept use it. It's just simply open land. And then if the town chooses to lease it to Windswept, that's a whole separate discussion between
Correct.
Windswept and the select board.
Yep, Windswept and Select Board is a whole separate discussion. It's not legally binding in the specific plan approval. What is legally binding in the specific plan approval is that the open space substantial benefit is upholding town plan goals. So the town can't turn around and develop that pasture land into another residential subdivision. The town must maintain, as broadly speaking, working landscapes, open space, conservation goals. But there's nothing that says in our bylaw or our town plan that says this land shall be leased to Windswept Farm. But I do believe and hope that the select board works in good faith on that, because there was so much community interest during the specific plan process for Windswept Farm.
Thank you, Emily.
So was that community interest, Williston residents, or how people were not even from Williston, I had that question. But, considering that the farm is the big selling factor of this development getting pushed through.
Recording stopped.
I'm confused about, that this hasn't been figured out yet, the relationship between the town and the forest fund.
It stopped because a laptop in the room died, so I just restarted. Apologies for that. The relationship is because the town hasn't acquired the land yet. And the specific plan approval is only for, this property and this development proposal. So until there is, a subdivision plat that's ready to be recorded, legal agreements that are ready to be recorded, there's nothing for the select board to take ownership of in order to be able to make a lease agreement or choose to not make a lease agreement with any party.
The gifts to the town were for the horse farm to keep functioning and the view shed. So to push this development through, otherwise it would have had to have gone through the proper channels and, wait their turn to develop this land. But because of these gifts, quote unquote, the horse farm was a big part of that.
Matt, do you want to tell her about proper channels? This is a proper channel.
So I'd just like to interject to note that the proposition that open space deeded to the town be exchanged for a different pathway through the town's growth management system was negotiated and resolved between the applicant and the select board as part of the specific plan approval. The DRB's job tonight and in subsequent hearings is to implement the changes to Williston zoning that were made by the legislative body at the time that the specific plan was approved. So I sort of said a version of this at the beginning, but at this point, it is not for the DRB to judge the merits or the wisdom of the decision that was made by the Planning Commission and Select Board to adopt and approve this specific plan. It is the job of this body to implement that decision and analyze the applicant's proposal against its terms. So we could probably talk for a long time about the reasoning behind that decision, but at this point, that part is complete, and we've moved into a stage where it is the law of the land as far as this piece of land is concerned.
Unfortunately, that is the case, yes, because, as you're developing this plan and you realize that we can't have that recreational path connected to, neighborhoods because it's a wildlife corridor. Well, of course it's a wildlife corridor. It's always been a wildlife corridor, and it's not just for birds. It's for all animals. We've seen all sorts of animals across the road and in our backyard that are totally going to be disrupted, with this development. And you're basically squeezing in as many houses as you can that are not on wetlands, but there's a chunk of wetlands there, just like there's all over, throughout this countryside. So I understand it's a done deal. It's just, I think there's some things that should definitely be tweaked a little bit more to make it not like it's this compact, bunch of houses here. And it is too bad that it wasn't just like one neighborhood. And here you have one neighborhood coming from Mountain View and one coming from Old Stage. And how do you kind of mesh them together where it feels like it's one development when it's kind of like two small developments? But, because of the wetlands and so I guess, it's gonna be, but I would like, an answer to how this got pushed through, so fast, but yet then the construction's gonna take 5 years. And that is a concern. That was a very good point. Because it's not just noise, it's everything. It's dust, it's litter, it's pollution, and just everything takes such a long period of time. That would be nice to have answered, what, you know, like, can it not be that long? If it's a done deal, and like you just said, this is the law of the land, why does it have to take 5 years to complete?
The chair
So,
wished me to.
so where did the 18 units per year originate from?
I may have to defer to Emily on the details of the exact number, but recall that when this project was proposed in specific plan, this project or a project on this piece of property going through Williston's growth management system as it sat at that time would have greatly prolonged its build-out time past that 5-year horizon that was made part of the specific plan approval. Williston's growth management system has the effect and express intent of slowing down residential development, both across the entire town as a whole, and very much has the effect of limiting the rate of development in individual projects. What the applicant asked for under the specific plan approval was essentially an accelerated schedule. And the compromise was not an unlimited accelerated schedule, you know, get going and just build everything as fast as you can, but this 18 unit a year cycle. And, you know, some of that was just based on a conversation with the applicant at the time of what's a realistic pace. And our experience is, that is actually probably a fairly rapid pace for a project comprised of units like this. You know, the Northridge project is, I don't know, in its 5th or 6th year of unit construction at this point. Obviously, that happened through COVID in part, but that's 39 units. So we may think we're regulating the speed of something. We have the intent sometimes of regulating the speed of something, but sometimes just the reality of what it takes to build things ends up being what drives that time frame. So, but the general thrust of the regulations in Williston is to limit and slow the pace of residential development. This project has a faster schedule as part of its approval.
If I may too, this project started in 2020 for us. So by no means is this being pushed through, I would say. You know, we started with the planning commission, then a specific plan committee was formed. Then we go back to the planning commission. Then we go to the select board. Every one of those steps, there was a vote taken and only one individual voted against the proposal the entire way through. That also included a pre-app to the DRB. So rather than your typical pre-app DP two-step process with the DRB, we went through 4 different approval processes, 4 different votes from 4 different committees over, you know, multiple years. So this is a longer process. The accelerated construction schedule is part of that, but it's definitely taking a longer process to go through the approval process in town rather than a normal case may be.
Okay, are there other hands raised in chat?
I actually have one more question. I know the traffic impact study was saying that there is no impact, but when you, it was, I guess it was done during August, but regardless, when you try to get out off of Old State Road onto the main road, so say you're going left, if you're going left to Wilton Central School, even if you're behind the car going turning left, I have waited as much, you know, depending on the time of day, as few as 2-3 minutes to pushing 10 minutes to get out onto the road. And I want to turn right. I'm not turning left anymore. So that's now, like when you have to wait behind, you know, 5+ cars, and there's no, you know, we have to wait till there's a break in the traffic. And if there was a four-way stop, then that would be helpful, but to wait for that break, and you gotta like kind of get out there, especially if you're turning left, that's really hazardous. I don't see how that's not gonna be impactful. With more, you know, houses, more cars, more people. Because right now, yeah, it can be really lengthy wait to get out to the main road. And then the same thing, for Mountain View Road. When you go all the way down Mountain View Road, you wanna take a right, you know, I think they're gonna make a 2-lane and hope, no, it seems like it. But I think it's that more of a town road, but if it was 2-lane and you can take a right on Red, that would be helpful. Turning off of Mountain View Road there, but that's also a long wait sometimes depending. Certain times of day are worse than others, obviously, but, that getting off of Old Stage Road is definitely, a problem, and it's hazardous if you're trying to turn left.
Okay, any other comments?
Jay Petrillo has his hand raised, and then we can turn it over to anybody else in the meeting room.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, just a quick question. Since this project is gonna potentially increase the population by 300 to 400 residents, there's currently a sidewalk on the, east side of Old Stage. Is there gonna be a, proposal or for a sidewalk on the west side, to minimize the amount of people crossing Old Stage, to access the sidewalk?
Emily, could you pull up the site plan,
Yep.
or Brian, can you just answer that?
Yeah, so there's no proposal for a sidewalk on the west side of Old Stage Road. We are proposing a crossing from our southern cluster to the rec path on the opposite side of Old Stage Road. As it's mid-block crossing, Public Works has requested that we include a rapid rectangular flashing beacon at that point for safety purposes. But due to the wetland crossing, which I believe now is via a bridge, we are not proposing a crossing or an additional crossing, nor would we get approval for one on the western side by the State Wetlands Program. So.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Jay, any further questions?
No, not at this point. I'm just trying to envision, you know, just on certain days, I just see a lot of people walking, well, when we walk, along the sidewalk. And, you know, right now, I don't know how many people cross Old Stage, particularly school kids in the morning that walk to the school. But, I mean, it's potentially create more of a bottleneck, down there, and kids crossing in various sections. But also residents from, River's Edge, you know, accessing the sidewalk. Just a concern, that's all. I know there's proposed, sidewalk, well, there's a sidewalk expansion on 2A. I'm just wondering, eventually down the road, what kind of proposal would be for a rec path on Mountain View? I mean, because again, you're increasing that parcel, and yes, it is an RZD designated area, that eventually, you know, Adams Farm is an RZD as well. And again, the increase in bicycles, walkers, joggers, people accessing various parts, and being able to walk or to use bicycles, create a safety corridor.
So what WDB 1524 says, must sidewalks or recreation paths be provided along roads? They must be provided along both sides of existing and proposed public roads, except where the town plan calls for the provision of a recreation path along existing or proposed road, so that that eastern side of Old Stage Road has that existing multi-use path. And the DRB may modify or eliminate the requirement for a sidewalk where safe, adequate bicycle and pedestrian circulation is provided by an off-street system of paths. I remember this discussion in the specific plan process, and that path looping along Mountain View Road and connecting the two neighborhoods provides that loop of circulation. There's also the challenge that a portion of that Old Stage Road frontage on the west is wetland, so getting permits would be challenging, if not impossible. And I believe that's why, those are the reasons why that connection isn't on that western side.
In any off-site improvements that you may be suggesting, what's the impact fee for traffic now, per unit?
The transportation impact fee,
It's $915 per multi-unit.
So roughly $1,000 a unit will get paid to the, as a ordinance, traffic impact fee to the town that can be used for pedestrian or vehicle improvement. So a substantial amount of money will be paid to the town for consideration for off-site improvements as well. So.
Great, thanks.
Okay, I'll open it back up to people present here at the hearing. Come back, please, sir.
Just one quick question, follow up to the build-out period. So if I can appreciate that the process was quite lengthy, and I've been part of that process in a way, and so wouldn't the developers, if they agree, and if the town agrees, the board agrees, couldn't that be, would you want it to be expedited then? Instead of a 5-year build-out, since everyone's been waiting for this for such a long time, what's the possibility of coming to a solution when the timeline, the build-out can be shrunk?
It's already been negotiated with the select board, right? It's not something that comes in front of the DRB now.
Not at this stage, no.
so what Chapter 11 says is no more than 18 administrative permits for fiscal year. So presumably, that first construction season is gonna be all infrastructure. They could still be pulling administrative permits for dwellings, and we understand that an administrative permit is valid for 2 years and can be renewed for a third year. So there could be instances where they're issued 18 permits per year, but more or fewer homes might actually begin or start construction. So it depends on how lengthy that initial infrastructure component takes. But the actual per year number of homes that either initiate construction or complete construction could be more or less than 18.
And it's closer to 6 years. It's 5.9, so it's closer to 6 years.
You have to take into account the absorption rate and how
Oh,
quickly you can sell
certainly.
them.
We'd
and
love to
there's
build
no-
this out
Right,
at 18
absolutely.
units
Yeah.
a year. That's the goal. Is it likely feasible for 6 years? You know, we'll see, but I would bet on unlikely.
Ma'am, did you have a question?
Yeah, and I'm not sure if it's totally your purview, but I'll ask you anyway, or bring the topic up. My name's Jude Hersey, and I live on Wildflower Circle, and I live at the very top of it, so I'm very aware of traffic patterns on Old Stage. And as all of this new development is being considered, I'm just wondering, even with the traffic study that I've seen, I can't imagine how we're going to add, if there are 109 here and you say 2 cars for every one of the houses, that's one whole batch. Then there's that other development that's near the old golf course. And I don't know whether they've even started that, but in any event, that's been approved. And now there's a new one going in across from the church, which is closer to where Industrial Ave and Mountain View come in. And I know that I've sat through 3 and 4 lights at the intersection with 2A and Mountain View. So every time I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, I can't imagine hundreds more cars that are all going to be funneled onto this. So I'm wondering what the town's plan is for that, of addressing that kind of concept, because the traffic really is going to be huge. And if you're going to have maybe 3 developments all going at the same time, they're even starting the one that's across from the church, I just saw that. Is that a consideration that you take as the Development Review Board? Or is that something that's totally different?
Emily, take this one, please.
Yeah, this is a great question. So, transportation's traffic studies, in the simplest of terms, they consider the level of service. And there's gradings and ratings in the standardized transportation analyses requirements for when an intersection gets to a certain grade, that adding something like a turning lane or other improvements to improve the flow of the intersection. I think everybody's in agreement that that Mountain View Road and Industrial Ave is a terrible intersection. It's been planned for a really long time to be improved when the Cirque Highway was canceled. And finally, after over a decade or more, that project is coming to fruition, where this summer and next summer, they'll continue the work on improving that intersection to improve the vehicle movements through it. When I say they, I mean the State Agency of Transportation. That is also another challenge with Williston Road as it's currently configured. Williston Road is a state right-of-way, a state highway. So any infrastructure improvements there would involve that Agency of Transportation. And I may defer to Matt, who can talk a little bit more about the Williston Road scoping study and the future of thinking about that corridor, because it is a challenging intersection and road with people moving very fast and trying to make turning motions at that intersection.
Right.
Folks may recall at the other end of the village when a roundabout was proposed to alleviate some of the traffic congestion near the corner quick, and that proposal was, turned down over a decade ago. So a lot of this plays into how ultimately projects are following requirements for traffic studies. They tend to fall below those thresholds, even though what people are experiencing is waiting a couple light cycles or waiting a couple stop sign cycles to get through an intersection. And then for the state thinking about regional improvements, that comes to, advocating to the state and the legislature and Agency of Transportation to get moving on a lot of these intersection projects to improve regional traffic flow.
So I would also add, when we apply to Act 250, V-Trans assesses a traffic impact fee also. So they have a capital improvement list, and if we lie within 10 miles of any of those, as bird flies to any of those sites, we get a fair share impact fee that's under what's called Act 145. So we pay traffic impact fees not only to the town, but we also pay them to the state as well, which funds intersection improvements like the one you're talking about.
Right. I know, and the other part is also the traffic that's going to come onto Old Stage going either way, whether it's Mountain View or it's Route 2. The traffic backs up there very frequently, and I can't even imagine with trucks coming in and doing this development, and then all the regular residents, once they move in there, then we've got another couple of hundred cars that are probably going to be going back and forth. So I'm just wondering what the town is planning in view of that. It's not that easy to get in and out of Old Stage on either end. And as a matter of fact, coming on Mountain View and wanting to come onto Old Stage is really scary. There's a gigantic swale right there. So I'm hoping when you're looking at, this whole development and everything, that you take the impact of those kinds of things in place. I understand that we need swales and all, but I'm always terrified that I'm going to end up going into a ditch if somebody going the other way actually is taking up more than the normal thing. So that's basically my concern about the whole project. I said to the Glazers, and I hope they understand that, I've lived there 26 years. I'm so grateful that they kept that land open for 26 years. So and I totally understand that we need more housing. Totally get that too. But I'm just concerned about the safety issues. I've heard people telling me that their kids, when they're on their bikes, trying to go off of Old Stage and then continue on Old Stage, the extension, they're really, really worried that there's going to be an accident there. So if we're going to have lots of trucks coming and everything, I hope that that's taken into account, the safety piece, because a lot of kids, ride their bikes to school and everything along the path. So anyway, I don't know whether you can't change the state's position on traffic. I understand that, but I'm just hoping that when you take that into account, that there is really a concern there, a safety factor for everybody, drivers and pedestrians.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else from the public that would like to address the board? Any raised hands?
I'm seeing no chats and no raised hands on Zoom.
Okay, this has been a productive session. We are going to continue DP 24-06 until March 11th. That's acceptable, Brian?
Yes.
Okay. And at this point, the DRB is going to go into deliberative session, so the public forum has concluded. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Folks, if you haven't signed in, Hannah has the sign-in booklet, and folks on Zoom, please make sure that your name is correct either in the naming feature or comment in the chat.
Okay, welcome back to the Williston Development Review Board for January 14th, 2025. The DRB is out of deliberative session. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of November 26th, 2024?
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Scott seconds it. Lisa made the motion. Any discussion?
Nope.
Hearing none. Yay or nay on approving the minutes? Paul?
Yay.
Lisa?
Yay.
Scott?
Okay.
Dave?
Yay.
The chair is a yay, 5 in favor, none opposed. Motion carries. The meeting minutes of November 26, 2024 are approved. Is there any other business to bring forth tonight?
Nope.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Not opposed. Motion to adjourn is in place, and we are done. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, I have a black lab, I can't wait.